morning. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for how great that you are, and thank you that because you are for us, there is nothing that can be against us. I thank you so much for who you are. Thank you for this time of worship that we have this morning. God, I thank you for our pastor. God, I thank you for the gifts and the abilities you've given him. God, I pray that you would be with him as he brings the message this morning. And I pray above all else this morning that you would be honored. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. You can be seated just for a few minutes as we do a few announcements. If you're a first-time guest this morning, we want to welcome you. There's a Connect card in the seat back in front of you. If you would fill that out and then give it to the desk. It's right outside the Family Life Center, the big area right outside. We'll give you a special gift just for coming this morning. We have just a few announcements. Today is our Starting Point class. If you've never been to Starting Point before, it is a way to get to know our church, what we stand for, what we're about, and also a way to join our church. So if you have not joined our church yet and would like to, please stay for Starting Point. It is after the second service, so around 12:30. It ends at 3, and if that's not enough incentive, we're going to have free pizza. So please come to that. You can just come to the pizza if you want to. It's going to be a great time. Next Saturday, Pastor Rick Lawrence, and that's Nate's dad, is going to come and do men's breakfast. That kind of looks like you, Nate. A little bit? Okay, a little bit. Okay, but he's going to be here at 7 o'clock. If you've never been to a men's breakfast, it is absolutely free. For all the rest of you, it's only $2. You cannot beat that deal. And finally, Easter is coming up on April 21st in 2 weeks, which is so exciting. We're going to have 3 services at 7, 9, and 11, and we're going to have an Easter egg hunt at 10:30. So you do not want to miss it. I would encourage all of you to invite a couple of people, invite a family. We've had a wonderful response on Facebook, so I assume that's going to be a wonderful event. We have someone special coming this morning. If I can see her anywhere, I don't know where she went. There she is. Miss Annette Glass. She is our women's ministry leader. We're going to have somebody represent different ministries come up from time to time. Today, Annette Glass is going to come up and share a little bit about our women's ministry. Give her a hand as she comes up. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to introduce you to the team of the women's ministry. It's not me, it's the team. Okay? This is Tamara and Christina. Okay? And the main reason we're here today is to introduce ourselves, because we have a lot of new people in our church who don't know who we are and what we're doing. We are, our group gets together to do activities. We have the women come together to lift each other up, to pray for each other, to encourage her, just to lean on each other. And that's what we're here. And we use Ecclesiastes 4:10. 2 are better than 1, for they help to each other. So we want everybody to start joining us. We're going to have, we had a paint day yesterday. It seemed like everybody had a good time. And we posted some pictures. And we love to get the women's emails so we can connect you with our emails so you know the events that are coming up. We're having May the 11th. We're having Mother's Brunch. It's for all ages. And it's going to be from 11 to 1. It's $15. We're going to have a guest speaker, Arlene Malone. I'm sorry. Tamara knows more about that one. So we're inviting everybody to come on the 11th. We're going to have tickets shortly, and we'll be selling them out. And so we don't have them today, but we will hopefully have them next week. So if you mark your calendars for the 11th at 11. We're also going to do the end of June a mother and son cookout. So that'll be different, something for you to come with your son. We had a daddy-daughter not too long ago, and now we're going to have a mother and son. Right? So if you will, we're going to have at the end of the service a little sheet to fill out. If you could just give us your email and name so we can just put you on our Hickory Ridge Women's Connect site. So all the activities we do and post afterwards will be on there, and you can be connected with us. If you have any questions, please reach out to any of us. We'll be glad to share other things that we're doing. All right? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please stand again and let's continue to worship the Lord.
Who am I that the highest would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me.
great job this morning. That's awesome. Before you receive it, this is what I want you to do. Don't sit down yet, okay? Don't sit down yet. I know you're just getting ready to get relaxed, okay? And so look at that person next to you, right? Look them in the eye, okay? And say, today's message is for you, right? Today's message is for you. Today's message is for you, okay? Renee, today's message is for you. Tyler, today's message is for you, right? Brad, today's message is for you. Tammy, this message is especially for you, okay? All right, now, amen, right? So give that guy a high five, give that person a high five next to you, and then you may be seated. All right, so thank you for did a fantastic job this morning. I am so proud of our worship team. I'm so proud of each and every one of you. And I thank you for your patience during our dusk. And the stage is looking great. And we had a guy come in and he carpeted it yesterday morning bright and early so that we have everything ready for the wedding of the century. Right? We had a wedding here last night. And I told Rob and April, I said, you know, the day after I got married, I was not in church. Okay? But they're here, okay? So they are more spiritual than I am. And so congratulations to Rob and his beautiful bride. God bless you both. Hopefully you did great last night. And what a great testimony night we had last night. It was a coffee house theme, and it was all about lifting up the name of Christ, okay? So I'm so proud of them. And I hope that when you came in this morning that you received a little pamphlet that has the sermon notes for this morning. And I hope that this afternoon, if you would like to stay for Starting Point, it's not too late for you to stay for Starting Point. And just so you kind of know what Starting Point is. Starting Point is the way that we introduce new people to our church. And in Starting Point, we're going to give you a free lunch today, so you can come back at 12:30. And in Starting Point, we go through A to Z, basically what our church believes. We spend some time dealing with spiritual gifts. We spend some time sharing the vision of our church, how to become a member of our church. And then you have an opportunity to ask questions. I get to hear your testimony. And it's really a great opportunity for you to connect well with our church. So please come this afternoon to Starting Point. And I'm really excited about the campaign that we're getting ready to start. And it's called Overcomer. And here is the series that we're doing, the Overcomer series. And many of you went to hear David Jeremiah on Thursday night at the Ted Constant Center. And we were inspired Thursday night. Great service. And I know it was an eye-opener for me. But this is what we're doing. What he spoke on a little bit on Thursday night is just one part of the theme of what we're going to do with Overcomer. Here's the workbook for it. And this is a great time to join a small group, okay? Whenever we do a campaign, and this is going to kick off right after Easter, this is a great time to join a small group. We're starting several new small groups, and there's a group that meets your schedule and meets where you live. So please be part of a small group, okay? And you'll get a lot out of it, and you'll be a blessing to the person that is hosting that small group. Well, there's a lot of things happening here, as you can see, a lot of changes that are happening. And so let me do a quick survey. How many of you really love change? Raise your hand. How many of you really love change? Oh, okay, all 5 of you. That's good. Some people are early adopters to change, and I love change. And so I would change things every week, and it drives my family crazy, sometimes drives myself crazy. But I really think that change for the sake of change is not a good thing, but I think it's really good to make changes. And remember when you first came to church, there was something that was changed so that you would feel welcome. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to get everybody to feel welcome, so when they come to Hickory Community Church, they feel like they're coming home. And when you drive onto our parking lot, I hope that you feel like, man, I'm coming home, right? I'm not going to church per se. I'm going to come visit my family, and I'm going to be at home. And so this is a place where you can be yourself, you can be relaxed, and we'll let you come and enjoy spending some time with us. And I got to meet some of our first-time guests this morning. We're really glad that you came to visit with us today. You are our honored guest. And the fact that you came this morning, we say a huge thank you for being with us. I hope that you come back, and I hope that you feel right at home. First time you're a guest, right? Second time you're a family member, okay? And so we put you to work on the second visit, okay? So we believe that every minister in our church is a member. And if you're a member of Hickory Community Church, God has a job for you to do. And all of us have different gifts. All of us have different talents. And so we talk about this in our starting point class. I actually spent a few minutes talking about the gifts that God has given you and how you can use those gifts and how you can use those gifts to glorify God and build up the body. And then you get some fulfillment out of it as well. So please be part of the starting point class this afternoon. If you haven't joined our church yet, I invite you to come. Pastor Jimmy says there's going to be plenty of pizza. I think that's what we're having today for lunch. But whatever it is, it's going to be good. And I love getting to meet you and to spend some time talking to you. And so come on and be part of that, okay? Let me give you an update real quick as to where we are with our building program. And I won't take a whole lot of time talking about this, but I want to give a big shout out to a lot of our men and women who are involved in this process. And well, my son sent in that picture somehow. And isn't that amazing, right? Yeah, he was kind of not too happy in that picture. But anyway, the building is coming together. And we have the brick going around the bottom that we finished up this week. And they framed in the bathrooms this week. We're going to rough in the plumbing the rest of this week. And so a lot of things are happening with this building. And so thank you so much for your generosity. I want to encourage you to keep on giving. And we are now at $42,850 that has come in. And we are trying our best to get this building under budget, okay? The budget is $125,000 is what we can do this for. And so we're trying to save a little money here and there wherever we can. And one of the best ways that we've been able to save money through this project is the generosity of God's people. We are blessed with some really neat tradespeople in our congregation, and they have just stepped in and offered their services, and so that has saved us some money. And so I'm really excited, and I'm hoping that we can come in under budget on this project, which never happens when we do a building program. But because of the generosity of God's people, we may be able to pull this off under budget. But I want you to mark your calendars for the first Sunday in June. The first Sunday in June is going to be our dedication Sunday, and we're going to have a big red a ribbon across the front of the building, and we're going to have our regular services, but in between, we're going to go out there and cut the ribbon, and I'm going to acknowledge some people that took a very special interest in this project, and I'll be listing out all of those who are involved in giving their time and their talents and their energies to pull this project off, and I can't wait. We already have people that are on the waiting list to get into our early childhood development center. And we had a lady come in this week, it was really cool, and I got talking to her, and I said, well, how many children do you have? And she said, well, I don't have any yet, but I'm having a baby in July, and I want to get on the waiting list so I can get my child into the program that you have. So good things are happening at Hickory Community Church, and you are a vital part of that. And I believe in the power of God's people to do abundantly more than they ask or think. So today I want to talk to you about hope. Loving somebody is offering them hope. And last week we talked about love is being involved in listening. And I gave you an assignment last week. I wanted you to listen well to somebody that you love. And did anybody take up that challenge? unbelievable deterrent in your life. Most people, when they give up and they get discouraged, it's not because their health is so bad or their resources are so low. The reason they give up is because they lose hope. If you have lost hope, you are in a world of trouble. And so if you love somebody, you want to infuse them with hope. And I'm going to begin with that hope that we have, and I'm going to give you the story of Peter. I love the story of Peter. Peter was a fascinating character. And some of the verses there, because of time, I can't read all of them, but I'm going to give you a backdrop of the life of Peter. Peter, as you know, was a fisherman. When he came to Christ, he didn't have a whole lot to offer, but he left his fishing business behind and became a staunch follower of Jesus Christ. As a matter of fact, when you look at the life of Peter, this is an amazing thing. You just look at your life, for example. Many of us know a lot of people, right? We have an acquaintance with a lot of people, right? If you're involved in a profession that you're in public, then you know a whole ton of people. You may even have more people that know you than you know them, right? And so you have a wide array of people that you're acquainted with. But then you have a smaller nucleus of people. They say the average person will have 12 close friends. Jesus had 12 disciples. But even with those 12 disciples, he had an inner circle, Peter, James, and John. That was the inner circle of Christ. That was who Christ really invested most of his time in and most of his energy with. And so I want to encourage you, don't waste your time with a lot of people that are sucking life out of you. Invest most of your energy and most of your time into people that are going to make a difference in the life of a community or the life of a family or the life of a church. And that's disciples. But then he had his inner circle that he knew was going to be the ones that would carry on the message of the gospel. Of Peter, it is said that God was going to build his church upon Peter. He was going to be that rock in which the church was going to be built upon. But as you look at the life of Peter, right, it didn't start off so great. Peter is a follower of Christ. Jesus is getting ready to be crucified, and he gathers all of his disciples around them, and he has a Passover meal with them. And he says at this Passover meal, all of you are going to betray me. All of you are going to forsake me. And this is the 12, right? The inner circle. We know what happened to Judas. Peter is in this group, and he says, you know what? I'm different. Those other guys, they may forsake you. They may abandon you. But this is what I'm going to do for you, Jesus. I'm willing to even die for you. Everybody else will forsake you, but not me. I am going to be there for you through thick and thin. Peter gets to a point, shortly after saying this, that he loses hope. He begins looking around at the circumstances and he discovers that he has lost hope. And instead of keeping his eyes on Christ, now he is looking at the situation that he finds himself in. And he finds himself losing hope. And he denies Jesus 3 times. Can you imagine how he felt? I mean, Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane, getting ready to be betrayed by Judas. Peter, in his zeal, takes out his sword and says, I'm going to take care of these guys. Commentators say that up to 600 soldiers came into the garden to arrest Jesus. Peter says, I'm going to take all 600 on. I am going to take care of this. And he takes out his sword, and I believe that he was aiming to take off the head of one of those Roman guards, but he missed. And he ends up taking off the ear of a guy by the name of Malchus. Jesus picks up that ear, puts it back on Malchus, and says to Peter, if you're going to live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. And he talks about the future of his kingdom. Peter gets distraught, and he follows the Lord off a distance, and he denies Christ 3 times. He lost his hope. You know, hope is essential for survival. As you look at how God has hardwired our brains, he has hardwired our brains in such a way that we must have a bunch of hope infused in our brains. If we don't have that, then we will not live to our fullest potential. They have discovered that people who have a lot of hope live happier lives, healthier lives versus those who are trapped in despair. Here are some studies that have been done on the matter of hope. Studies show that hopeful college kids get higher GPAs and are more likely to graduate. You see, it has nothing to do with the aptitude that you have. It has everything to do with the attitude that you have. Those who are hopeful that they can finish it end up finishing it. Hopeful athletes perform better on the field, cope better with injuries, and have greater mental adjustments when situations change. So if you look at a change and you adapt well to that change, it's not really the change that is the problem. It is the hope that you have lost because of the change. In one study of the elderly, those who said they felt hopeless were more than twice as likely to die during this study. So they got these elderly people together, and they divided up into two categories. Those who have a lot of hope, those who do not have much hope at all. They came back 6 months later and discovered that those who had very little hope, more than half of them died within 6 months. When you think about hope, it's pretty clear that hope is a powerful catalytic in our lives. Dr. Shane Lopez, a psychologist who is regarded as the world's leading researcher on hope, claimed that hope isn't just an emotion, but is an essential tool to our lives. In a powerful article named Dying of Despair, psychiatrists and others observed that starting to look at death and suicide and drug overdoses, they increase as despair increases. He points out that a number of long-term studies have shown there's a difference between high-risk patients who survive and those who die by suicide. Here is the conclusion of his research. Over a 10-year span, it turns out that one of the factors most strongly predictive of suicide is not how sick a person is, it's not even how many symptoms they exhibit, or even how much pain they're in or suffering, or whether they are rich or poor. These were not the number one indicators of whether or not a person would commit suicide. The number one indicator was the fact that a person lost their sense of hope. They started living in hopelessness. The man without hope is the likeliest candidate for suicide. We cannot live without hope. Jesus predicted that all of his disciples would deny him. All would forsake him. All of them were going to lose hope. Peter thought he was going to be the exception of that rule, and he tried to stay awake when Jesus was praying. If you remember the story, just prior to Jesus being forsaken or betrayed by Judas, he gathered that inner circle, Peter, James, and John. He says, can you go a little further with me? Can you spend some time praying? They went on ahead, they all fell asleep. Jesus came back and woke them up. They fell asleep again. Jesus finally said, well, go on and continue your sleep. You see, when you think about it, they lost their hope because they stopped praying. They lost their hope because they lost the focus of what their life was all about. Peter couldn't even stay awake for an hour to pray with Jesus or during the time in the Garden of Gethsemane. James and John, well, they fell asleep too. I want you to know that every once in a while in your life, you're going to feel despair weighing heavy on you. And there's going to be a temptation to run during that time of despair. I want to encourage you to remain steadfast in those times when you feel like you're losing hope. Peter, if he could have stayed awake for that hour, I believe would have been successful in overcoming the pressures, and he would not have denied Christ. In Matthew 26:41, Jesus says, stay awake and pray, so that you will not enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. So Jesus is giving us this challenge. Prior to you losing hope, you began to lose the power of prayer in your life. You began to follow at a distance. Peter tried to prove his loyalty over and over again. But when the pressure was on him, because he had lost that connection with prayer, he lost hope. This morning you may have come here today and you said, man, I kind of have lost hope myself. I want to encourage you to realize that you can transform obstacles in your life and turn them into opportunities. Everyone is looking for hope. We are born with pain. In fact, one person every 40 seconds, this blows my mind, one person every 40 seconds will take their own life. And the reason they take their own life is because they have lost the power of the choice. When we are facing unbelievable odds and we feel like we have no love and we have no hope, everything changes. But the biggest discourager in my life is not the circumstances around me, but the biggest discourager in my life is me. And if you look at your life and you've lost hope this morning, I want to encourage you. You haven't lost hope because your circumstances have changed so drastically. You haven't lost hope because you're in a whole lot of pain. You have lost hope because you've got your eyes on yourself. Words are powerful. What happens between your two ears will change your life for good or for bad. When a person begins to lose hope, they change the way they begin to process things. I want you to understand in this time of lost hope that God has a message for you even during that time. There's a statement that I want you to think about. when you don't get a miracle in your life, maybe God wants you to be a miracle to somebody else. Oftentimes we pray for God to do something drastic, and it doesn't seem like He's very quick in answering that prayer. For almost 18 years, I have been praying that God would heal my son from autism. And it almost feels like that prayer is not being answered. But I've discovered that sometimes God doesn't answer our prayers the way that we want them to be answered. Sometimes God says, you know what? I want you to be hope for somebody else. I'm not going to bring a miracle into your life because I want you to be a miracle for somebody else. When we don't get the miracle that we want in our lives, God may be saying to us, I want you to be the miracle in the life of somebody else. How does this happen? How do we get to that point where we can bless somebody else? When you lose hope, you have turned things all into yourself. When you begin to gain hope, you realize that my job is not just to be filled with hope. My job is to offer hope. When I love somebody, I reach out and I offer hope to that person. And when that happens, lo and behold, I get filled with hope. So here are some things that will help you to get on the right track. And if you really love somebody, you're going to offer them these things. First of all, refocus your vision. In Matthew 16:17, Jesus says, blessed are you, Simon of Jonah. Jesus blesses Simon, right? And Simon has just denied him. For this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but in my Father in heaven. And this is the refocus that Jesus gives to Peter after Peter denies him. Jesus says, you know who you are? I want you to know who you are because you're thinking wrongly about who you are. You are Peter. And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Verse 19 says, I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. So here's my question for you this morning. What vision do you have for your life? No small vision. I want you to think big. I want you to think a big, audacious goal that God has for your life. That will infuse you with hope. You see, many of us get discouraged because our dreams are too small. Think big of how God can use you. And I'm not talking about being filled with arrogance and being filled with pride. That is a sign that you have lost hope. I'm not talking about how much you can do for the kingdom of God. I want you to think about how God can infuse you with hope and how you can be a blessing to others. And when that happens, the second thing that you begin to do is begin to raise expectations. In Mark chapter 16, he says to them, don't be alarmed. And this is talking about the resurrection of Christ. We're fast forwarding the story here. You're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. He was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. I love verse number 7. Peter was discouraged. He denied Christ. He's at the bottom of the barrel, emotionally speaking. And Jesus says to this woman, who sees him as he's risen, go tell his disciples. But I want you to make a special visit to the guy by the name of Peter. Jesus saw something in Peter that Peter didn't even see in himself. It says Peter has a little trouble doubting. We always think about doubting Thomas, but Peter also had a little trouble with doubting. He knew how bad his life was. He knew how far he was from Christ. He knew he had denied Christ. But Jesus says, go tell Peter that I am risen. And he's going ahead of you into Galilee. They're going to see him just as I have told you. So here's my question. Who can I help? Who can I serve? When we look at offering hope to somebody, we are serving them. We say, I love you so much that your needs are more important than my needs. Here's the second thing that we can offer. We can offer hope, but secondly, I think we must offer healing. In Mark chapter 2, a crippled man is needing to be healed. And Jesus heals this man, and he gets ridiculed for healing this man. Jesus responds and says, it is easier for me to tell this crippled man that his sins are forgiven or to tell him to get up and pick up his mat and go on home. Jesus continues on and says, I will show you that the Son of Man has the right to forgive sins here on earth. So Jesus said to the man, get up, pick up your mat, and go home. The man got right up, he picked up his mat, and he went out while everyone else watched in amazement. When you love somebody, you offer them healing. Healing, genuine healing, is found through forgiveness. Burnout happens in our lives when we think that we have to do it all. When we think that we've got to take care of everything. Healing happens with forgiveness. Many people lose hope because instead of receiving forgiveness and offering forgiveness, they harbor onto things. They become filled with bitterness and resentment. This morning, if you're listening to me, you have had a time in your life where something bothered you, and it got stuck in your life. And you pondered it, and you meditated it, and many times it takes on the form of a person. Maybe it is a spouse, maybe it is a family member, maybe it is your boss, maybe it's a co-worker, maybe it's your pastor, maybe it's somebody else that you are close to. You see, close people are always the ones that can hurt us the most. But in reality, that person hasn't really hurt you that bad, but you got stuck on something small. That bitterness now has consumed you. And it is exhibited in the fact that you're starting to lose hope. You're starting to throw up your hands and say, there's no reason for me to go on. And you think the best thing to do is to abandon that situation. Abandon that marriage, abandon that church, break off that relationship, and you think that will be the cure. But even after you break that off, the bitterness still remains. The cure that you need is a miracle of healing. It wasn't the fact that he was crippled. His big problem was that he hadn't had his sins forgiven. When he got his sins forgiven, healing ensued. When we offer forgiveness, we are eliminating burnout in our lives. You see, most of us are not burnt out because we're doing too much. Most of us are burnt out because in our minds, we're overwhelmed. Right between our two ears, we're overwhelmed because of our circumstances. Because we think we've got to do it all. We think we've got to control it all. So how do I deal with this? After I've dealt with the issue of forgiveness and I release that person, I'm actually releasing myself. How do I deal now with this burnout? I replace it with balance. How do you relax? As you look at your life, how do you relax? Most Americans relax through escapism. They will binge watch television. 41% will enjoy watching the superhero movies or watching TV, binge watching. Of that 41%, that is their escape, 75% say that they routinely will watch 3 or 4 more episodes in a single setting. It says we can't stop binge watching on our smartphones either. If I were to ask you honestly this morning, we have been gathered here now for 49 minutes. How many of you have not checked your phone since you've been gathered here for 49 minutes? Don't raise your hand, okay? 1 or 2 of you, right? Hey, I'm guilty, okay? I was doing a text message as this worship team was worshiping, okay? I'm guilty, okay? I think we all struggle with this incident of being binge watching with our phones. 88% regularly check their phone even while they're on vacation. 50% admit to this. They're so much focused on their phone that they have tripped over things in their home because they weren't paying attention. And more than 10% reported missing their vacation destination while traveling because they were so focused on their phone screens. Well, how in the world do we recover and get the rest that we need? We don't find it in our smartphones. We avoid burnout, and the next time you want to try to avoid some burnout, God gives us specific directions in our lives. That means that we consult Him about our schedules. We take time out for ourselves, and we learn to depend on His strength to carry out our duties. I've discovered that when I am where I need to be in my relationship with God, He makes me much more effective in my relationships with people, in the use of my time, in the use of my money, and in the use of my talents. Every day as I get up in the morning, I say, Lord, I only have a few hours today to serve you. Would you allow me to be the most effective person that I can with these few hours that you have given me? Because I don't know about you, but anxiety and stress come into our lives because we tend to be control freaks. We tend to feel like we've got to control everything. You cannot control everything. As a matter of fact, the older I get, the more I realize that most things are out of my control. Hosea 6:6 says this. You can write this down because this I don't think is in any notes. Hosea says, and this is God speaking to Hosea, Hosea, this is what I desire from you. I desire your steadfast love rather than your sacrifice. Knowledge of God rather than your burnt offerings. Now, I kid around with people sometimes. You know, when you show up and you're supposed to have a gift and you don't bring a gift, and this is what I say. I says, my presence is your gift, right? Some say, man, what a disappointment, huh? I'm glad you came, but I would have liked to have some cash or I'd like to have a nice gift. But when you understand how God thinks, God says, first and foremost, your presence is my present. God receives our present. He says, I want you to know me. I want you to understand where I am. And then you give a gift after that. Number 3, or the next little point, under number 2 rather, is refocus your future. What do I need to start today to be emotionally and spiritually healthy? Here's some things that you need to focus on. Care of yourself. Self-care. Now this almost sounds like I should care about myself, right? I should care about everybody else, but look what Jesus said, and I love how Eugene Peterson put it in the message. He says, when Jesus is speaking, he says, man, are you tired? Are you worn out? Burned out on religion? Jesus says, come to me. Get away with me, and you'll escape, you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything too heavy on you, anything ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely, and you'll learn to live lightly. Care for yourself. There is no virtue in burning out. There is virtue in understanding I've got to sit at the feet of Jesus sometimes, and I've got to allow Him to work in my life and to give me the rest. And unfortunately, when we get super busy, it seems like that is the thing that gets set aside. That is the thing that we get too busy for. Here's the second thing as you refocus your future, is to control your thoughts. Long before you have thrown your hands up and said, I give up, you have quit in your mind. Control your thoughts. Did you know that the average person, between 70 and 90% of their thoughts are negative? And so you're trying to live a positive life when 70 to 90% of your thoughts are negative. Have you ever come up to somebody and they just kind of, they just spew all over you, and it's like, where in the world did this come from? I tell you where it came from, and we're all guilty of it. We have been thinking these things through our minds, and all of a sudden that person that we've been thinking negatively about shows up in our presence. And we don't know what to do with it because we've been thinking negative about this person, and so what's in our mind drops down into our heart and comes out of our mouths. Refocus and control your thoughts. Paul said this, for the weapons of warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for the pulling down of strongholds, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. So this is a phrase that you need to hold in on. Bring every thought into the captive obedience of Christ. The thought's going negative. You know it's going negative, but you fuel it and you keep it going that way. And then you find somebody else that will agree with your negative way of thinking. Isn't it amazing that we drift toward people that we are like? So if you're a negative person, I can't understand why I think negative people want to come to me. What you're in essence saying is that you are a negative person, and that negativity is being attracted to you. If you're a positive person, you'll discover that you will be attracted to positive people. There's certain people that if I don't get a job done, I know who I need to call, because they're going to get it done. There's certain people that I'm going to call, if I don't want to get a job done, I'm going to talk to them, because they will stall it, they will criticize it, and they will put it out to death for me. If you look at your life, you know that is true. So controlling your thoughts, capturing them to the obedience of Christ, and then connect with godly people. This is the power of being connected with a small group, and connect with godly people, right? Not the ones that necessarily say they're godly. By the way, if you have to tell somebody that you're godly, you're probably not that godly. It's kind of like if I have to keep telling people, well, I'm a pastor of the church. I am insecure. I very rarely tell people I'm a pastor, because they act different when they find out I'm a pastor. I keep that on the down low, right? I was talking to one guy one time, And he found out I was a pastor. I didn't tell him. And his hands started burning because he's hiding his cigarette behind his back. I said, man, I know you're smoking. I said, I could smell you a mile away. I said, that don't bother me. And I said, you know, smoking those old nasty cancer sticks, they won't send you to hell. Now, make you smell like you've been there and back, but the cigarette smoking ain't going to send you to hell. I had a good dialogue with him, all right? Connect with godly people. Judge others the way that you want to be judged. That's what Jesus said, right? Matthew 7:1. If unbelievers will know any verses in the Bible, say, well, Jesus said don't judge, right? I always ask them, I said, look at the whole context of what Jesus said. Jesus said don't judge, Matthew 7:1. And he says the reason you shouldn't judge is because the way you judge others is the way that you're going to be judged. So we judge people based upon God's word, right? And that's how we judge ourselves, based upon God's word. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, judging others makes us blind, whereas love is illuminating. By judging others, we bind ourselves to our own evil, and to the grace which others are just as entitled to as we are. Connecting with godly people. Next bullet point, command action. Now this is the part that sometimes gets left off, right? We have all these grandiose ideas of how we're going to think different, we're going to hang out with godly people, but now the proof is in the pudding. Are we going to lead action? Am I lifting up anybody, or am I empowering anybody today? Do I make it a point to include other people? Do you see greatness in others, or are you so insecure that you think every story has to come back to you? You ever talk to somebody and you're sharing with them about something you're going through, and they want to one-up you, right? They want to one-up you. So it's like, well, I got 4 hours sleep last night. Oh yeah, wow, I got 2. Now, where'd that come from? I'm just trying to tell you I'm a little tired today. Well, you should be tired, man. Bless God, I get on 2 hours of sleep. What are you complaining about? A sign of a very insecure person. Are you willing to include other people? Do you see the greatness of other people? You see, leadership is just the opposite of ego. Ego is this: I'm going to edge God out. I'm edging him out because I'm God. And I think that self-centeredness is the plague of America. We think everything is about us. Every story is about us. Everything should be revolving around us. When you do that, you lose hope because you ain't that great. And your hopes are dashed because you can't even live up to your own expectations and your own proclamations that you've made about yourself. Don't edge God out. I've discovered that the more I empower people, the more I encourage people, the more I believe in people, the more they believe in me, and even more important than that, the more God will begin to believe and trust me. Here's the third thing we're going to offer. We're going to offer hope, we're going to offer healing, and then we're going to offer help, okay? Old-fashioned help. Hebrews 13:16 says, do not forget to do good. Don't forget to share with others. For with such sacrifices, God is well pleased. Galatians 2:6 says, carry each other's burdens. That's helping people out. Carrying their burdens. And when you do this, you're actually fulfilling the law of Christ. Here's some real practical ways in which you can help other people. Help them by recharging their batteries. True rest seems to be elusive for many Americans. Did you know that only 1 in 7 adults, that's 14% of Americans, will set aside a day a week for rest? And on that one day of a week, if we do set a day a week to rest, what do? Mostly work. Only 1 in 5 of that small group say that they don't do any work at all. Even fewer Americans commit to daily time alone with God. That's 16% with God. 21% say they do different activities to recharge them. Only 12% of American adults say that they are intentional about setting aside a time of the day when they don't use electronic devices. You see, being constantly connected is allowing us to lose our energy. Hebrews 4:9-11 is a powerful passage. So then, Jesus says, there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. Whoever has entered into God's rest has also rested from his works as God did from his. Now, I'm not talking about being lazy, okay? Some of you are going to take this as an excuse to be lazy. I'm not talking about that. If you're a lazy person, then you need to get off your blessed assurance and start working. You need to get somebody that will kick you in the seat of the pants to keep you on track, okay? But most of you don't fall into that category. Maybe a few of you do, right? But most of you don't fall into that category. Millennials tend to have a little more trouble with this than not, right? Those who are young adults have a little trouble with this. Those of you who are over, say, 50, right, the end of the baby boom generation, tend to be workaholics. There is a Sabbath for the people of God. Whoever has entered into God's rest has also rested from his works as God did from his. Let us therefore strive to enter into that rest, so that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience. What in the world is Jesus talking about? Jesus says when we enter into that holy rest, we are much like God. God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and all that is within there, and then he rested. He gave us that example of how we to live our lives. So when we enter into that rest, we are very much like God, and as we do that, we keep ourselves from falling into disobedience. You're most prone to fall into sin when you're overtaxed, when you're stressed out, when you're exhausted, when you're stretched beyond that point where you've taken a time to rest. And then the last bullet point is refuse to go it alone. Always have somebody with you. Just like Jesus always has somebody with him. I tend to be an isolationist, right? Believe it or not, I like to be by myself. I like hanging out with myself. I love reading. I love studying. That is by nature where I would be. I have to actually force myself to be involved with the lives of people. And I want you to know that with practice, you can actually get very good at hanging out with people. With practice, you can be really good with connecting well with people. Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. Mike mentioned this verse this morning, and he talks about the whole fact that we shouldn't give up. I want you to think about the area of your life that you are most weak in. And if you don't know it, then I promise you that your wife or your husband will help you in this area, okay? I want you to take that weakness and say, Lord, I'm going to give this weakness over to you. And I want you to make me strong in this area. Maybe it's in the area of giving, right? I don't think you're ever going to be where God wants you to be until you learn the concept of giving. And start with a tithe, right? That's a good starting place where you understand I'm going to fully rely on God and I'm trusting him by giving back a portion of what he has already given me. And the reason this is so hard because we look at our finances and we can become these control freaks when we look at it. It's I'm having a hard time living at 100%. If I give up 10%, I'm going to have a more difficult time living in the 90%. Now, some of you have carried the same thinking over to work. You think if I work harder and I put my hand to the plow and I'm very diligent, I'm going to be more effective. Study after study has been done to say that we become less effective after we work about 60 hours a week. That's the breaking point. Once you get past that 60 hours a week, you're thinking, because I worked 80, I've got more done, but you become very inefficient. You've actually wasted a lot of time. You're spinning your wheels. Sometimes the godliest thing you can do is take a nap. Just go home and take a nap, right? I am stretched, I am overwhelmed, and so on Sunday afternoons, I go home and I watch something on TV, and I have a power nap, right? 15-minute power nap, right? It's amazing what that will do. But somebody says, I'm too busy to take a power nap, right? I'm too busy to do all this stuff. And you're wasting your energy because your brain is not fully functioning as it should. Your body is not where it needs to be physically. And spiritually, you don't have that power behind what you're doing. So you're spinning your wheels. I was raised in New England, and a lot of times we had snowstorms that would come up, and you kind of learn how to drive in snow. And I could always tell somebody who was not from the north when a snowstorm came through and they were unable to navigate their vehicle. Because as they got stuck, they thought, well, the best thing we can do is to mash the accelerator, right? And I think you're spinning, and they get themselves into a rut. And they don't get themselves out of that rut by smashing on the accelerator even more. I've seen people try to stop cars and slam on the brakes. Now, this is before they had anti-lock brakes. And lose control. I've seen many Christians have lost control because they got so anxious, they got so stressed, they had things running through their minds. Because they were exhausted, they couldn't process things. Years ago, I managed a restaurant called Friendly's. And people would come in, and they would be hangry, right? Some of you guys are like that, right? And I would tell my staff, I said, the first thing you need to do is get that guy something to eat. And when you get that guy something to eat, he'll come right down on you. Hey, Christian, maybe you're hangry this morning. Maybe you come here this morning and say, man, I'm stressed. I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to get in a group. I don't have time to connect with other people. I'm busy. And you're thinking, well, I got to keep busy so I can keep all these plates spinning. And it's not working for you. And you're very frustrated. You're very discouraged. I want to offer you some hope today. I want to offer you some healing today. And I want to offer you some help today. If you burn out, what good are you to your family? If you burn and crash, what good are you to your church? If you burn out, what good are you to your community? I have yet to see God use somebody who is discouraged. Your life will be marked by whatever you can get past. Whatever that stopping point for you will stunt your growth. You will never get beyond whatever it takes to. I encourage you to cast all your care upon Him because He cares for you. I want to encourage you, don't go it alone. The church is God's biggest support group in the world. We have ministries that will help you to get healed up, to get hope back into your life. We have a ministry called Celebrate Recovery. Many of you are overwhelmed because you have a habit or a hurt you can't get past. And you keep thinking, the more I think about it, the less I'll have this trouble, but it's consumed you. You have become addicted to that thought. Did you know that God has wired our brain in such a way that when we fixate on something, we get stuck on that? Now this is good, right? Because you can remember how you get home. You can remember your telephone number, and hopefully you can remember your wife's name. So God wired our brains that way. When we get stuck on a hurt or a habit that is not pleasing to Him, that hard wiring is still there. Do you ever meet somebody who says, why in this world is this person constantly so negative? They're negative about everything. They have rehearsed and nursed their bitterness and their unforgiveness. And they can't help but be that way because they're addicted to that way of thinking. There's hope, there's help, there's healing. They've got to acknowledge that, and as they change the way they think, their brain actually becomes rewired. You can change your life by the way that you change the way you think. So this morning I want to encourage you, each and every one of you, this week to take up the challenge. Who in my life needs hope, healing, and help? I want you to think about that person right now. Who in my life do I need to reach out and bless? Who do I need to encourage with healing? Who do I need to offer help? You will discover by offering help to somebody else, you actually help yourself. Our worship team is going to come. They're going to sing. Our ushers are going to come. They're going to take the offering. And then we're going to be dismissed. But before we do that, and I want to pray for you. If I had the time, I'd have you come forward, but our time is up. So this morning, I'm going to ask you to bow your head for just a moment. And as you look at your life, life today. You say, man, I need some help, Pastor. I have lost all hope. I have a great need for healing, but I really need to help somebody. I'm going to take the challenge this week to help somebody else. Through love, I'm going to offer them hope, healing, and help. If you're going to take this challenge this week, I'm going to pray for you. I may not know you by name, but I'm going to pray for, as a group of people that over the next 7 days, that you're going to reach out and offer hope and healing and help to somebody. So if you're taking that challenge, nobody's looking but me. If you're going to take that challenge, you just put your hand up. Say, hey, Pastor, I'll take the challenge. Thank you. I see hands everywhere. I see hands everywhere. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I see hands everywhere. I see you in the back. I see you in the front. All right, Lord, here we are. And you see our hands raised up into the air. And so I pray for your power. I pray for your infusion of your spirit so that we can be a blessing to others today. Help us not to be weary in our well-doing, for in due time we will a harvest if we don't faint. Help us to be encouraged today, get the rest that we need. May that be rest. Maybe rest from our phones, rest from being constantly connected with social media. Lord, help us to enter into your rest, because that is where there's power. And as we enter into your rest, it's not this do nothing, right? As we enter into your rest, we're in essence saying, Lord, would you fill us with your spirit? Would you fill us with your energy? Would you fill us with your power? So that we can honor you and bless you and encourage others. Lord, your will be done today. In Jesus' name, amen. Ushers are going to come. They're going to receive the offering this morning. And then our worship team is going to sing us out. Thank you for being with us here today.
Let's sing that again.